weekly conversation. So Jennifer, just to give you a little background, this group has been meeting, or I started it with Maria about 7 years ago. And every Saturday in the Newark Library, we meet to have a cafe and conversazione. So
Nice.
the goal is to speak only in Italian. And we have all different levels, but people have progressed in many ways. And so it's not a beginner's class, but it's just a practice session. And we're representing 3 countries. And we have one of our members, Tom Kelly, has moved to Italy for 3 months to study. He's in Verona. So Tom's with us from Verona. And Camille and I are coming from Florida. And in the life, we have Franca in Western Connecticut. Maria is in the Bronx, New York City. And Patrizia Paterna is in Stratford, Connecticut. And then we have our librarian, our special host, who is a hostess of the most, is Cindy Leahy, who gets up every Saturday morning through the pandemic from her house. She brought us connected to Zoom.
Nice.
She kept us going. And then in the library, today is the first time in, I guess, 18 months, that more than 18 months, 20 months, that we were able to meet in the library in person. So we have there, I'm going to go from left to right in my screen. I believe that's Joanne and George Jackson. In the aqua shirt is Francesco or Vance Alexander. And I think coming in there is Elaine Camerata with pulling out the chair. Then we have Anne Bolognani and Mirvette, who's walking in the background. Anyway, so we just had a few minutes to sort of catch up and wait, get everybody assembled. So this is the first, trying from the hybrid Zoom and in person, and very excited to have you as our first guest speaker. I think everybody has read the book. I'm a little bit rusty on it. We read it a while ago too. Jennifer was kind enough to do a live presentation from, were you in London then? You're in London today.
I'm in London today, yes.
In March 18th, International Women's Day, she assembled a panel of experts on midwifery. And we had 3 continents represented. I believe there was, but the Global Midwife Association, I believe, is somewhere in Africa. Is that?
Yeah, I think she came. She didn't present, but she helped us collect the panel. She was fantastic.
And we had someone in Italy and England, and I think Chicago. So just a little bit, and then we start talking about the book, and Jennifer can give her presentation. Jennifer Anton, of course, grew up Italian American in Illinois. I don't remember exactly where, but she then had a career in corporate marketing and advertising communications, very successful. She was with Tory Burch, and I think you're with La Perla now.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing luxury brands. She's doing great work. But I think a while back, she always remembers stories that her grandmother told her, and her grandmother was a midwife in Italy, and she wanted to. The work of her life was really giving birth to this book. I think she spent 14 years researching it, and after her own difficult pregnancy and childbirth, she knew she had to tell the story of these incredible women, which is later subtitled "The Original Working Woman Midwife." So think about it: who's first responders would be definitely a midwife. So there's a little bit of history of her book. I guess it's historical fiction, and I will let her, instead of me boring you, I would just let her take it away. And thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you, Pat. I love being here. And hi, everyone. Raise your hand if you have Italian heritage as well. Okay. Italian heritage. Okay, so there's quite a few of you. And how many of you are from Northern Italy? Yeah, okay, a few. All right. And Southern? Okay, quite a few. And then Central, I guess there's some there too. Okay, great. It just helps me have a little bit of context.
Cindy, could you please click the got it?
Can you hear me well?
Hear her.
There's the meeting is being recorded. There's that little icon
There's
there.
the pop-up. Whoever recorded the meeting, requested the recording of the meeting, can you just click
Cindy.
got it?
Just click what?
Got it.
Got it. I don't know if you can see the screen, but there's a pop-up.
Oh,
Says meeting's being recorded, but then it's over Tom.
I
Yeah,
think
because we
locally
were
you have
able
to
to
probably
click
kick
that we
yeah.
acknowledge that we're being recorded, but nobody there can acknowledge it.
Can we press on the iPad, maybe? Is the iPad here accessible?
No, it's not, that won't work. Now,
Okay, it's okay then, I guess,
Okay.
Tom, we know you're there, Tom.
All right, guys,
Please
I'm actually going to share my screen and share a presentation. Is that okay, Cindy?
that's fine.
Okay,
Oh.
I'm going to go do that now. It said the host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you enable that?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, let me know when you have. And can everyone hear me all right?
yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Second.
Yeah, you can-
No, knowing that this is very technical, if anything goes wrong, stay there. I'll come back if anything goes wrong with Wi-Fi or whatever. We know we're working in unique technical age right now, globally connected. So, no, not yet.
What I'm doing, Jennifer, is making you co-host, then you can share the
Perfect.
screen.
Perfect. That's great. Okay, it seems like I can. Can you see my screen, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to join you from London. I am Jennifer Anton. I'm the author of Under the Light of the Italian Moon. Thank you. If any of you have read it, thank you. And I'm sure we'll have a very interesting discussion and questions at the end. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the book and how it came to be. And then at the end, we'll have some questions about it. So it'll be about a half hour that I'll share it with you. So as Pat said, I am an Italian-American dual citizen. I was born in Joliet, Illinois, and I now live between London, and I also have a home in Lake Como, Italy. I'm very much a proud advocate for women's rights and equality, and I hope to rescue women's stories from history, starting with my Italian family. My website is boldwomanwriting.com. Feel free to go there. It links to a lot of different social media, images from the book, lots of different interesting podcasts that you can listen to, and so forth. So I have a couple of questions for you guys. One of the questions that came into my mind in 2006, and it came in pretty strongly, was what do the people we love leave us when they go? And along with that question, what questions go unanswered because we never find time to ask them the questions, or we never find time to listen to people that we love before they go? And then who is really going to remember the essence of who you are when you're gone? Who's going to tell your story? Because we all have stories. We're living them right now. You guys there in the library are living a story. Everyone at home is having a story tonight. Whatever you're doing is part of your story. Tomorrow, we're in the middle of our story. Some of us are in the center of it. Some of us are towards the end. But we're all living these stories. And in 2006, these questions came to me quite strongly because I was pregnant with my daughter. And I decided that I wanted to ask my Italian grandmother about her life in Italy. I knew that she had grown up in World War II Italy. I knew that because in high school I had asked her about it and she had mentioned it, but I had never gotten time to get the answers. So I wrote down in a notebook all the questions I wanted to ask her, and then I put it on my counter and I decided, okay, someday I'm going to ask my grandmother those questions. And as the months went by, I got bigger and bigger and more pregnant with my daughter, but I never brought those questions with when I went to visit my grandmother. And then after my baby shower, she called the ambulance because she wasn't feeling well. She ended up in open heart surgery and she ended up in the hospital. And again, over that time, I never went and I went to visit her, but I didn't bring the questions. She wasn't really well enough for me to ask those questions. And then I had my daughter, and a couple of weeks later, I myself went into heart failure. They were able to help me and get me out, but 2 weeks after that, my grandmother passed away. She was never able to answer the questions that I had. She was never able to meet my daughter. And in that notebook that I had originally written the questions, I wrote a letter to my baby girl explaining about her grandmother. And then I watched my mom stand up and talk about her mother. And in that moment, myself as a new mother who was uncertain of her own life, my daughter, this baby girl coming into the world, my mother having just lost hers, my mother becoming a grandmother because of the fact that my child was born, myself now a mother, all of this kind of blew up in front of me at the funeral. And it was very powerful and very impactful. And I just felt, where does all this strength, where does this connection between mothers and daughters come from? And then later that day, we went to my grandmother's house, all the cousins, and we were going through all of her things. And I remember feeling desperate. How am I going to remember my grandmother? How am I going to give my daughter something to let her know about her great grandmother's life? What is it? What kind of thing can I keep that will give that to her? And ultimately, we started going through all the things, and I found this little, on the lower right, you see this little album, and there were pictures of her as a teenager with people I didn't know who they were. And suddenly I realized, well, maybe I don't even know who my grandmother really was. And so this started an entire process of the desire to go back, to answer the questions, to get connected with those in Italy. And it really led to an obsession that eventually changed my entire life. It led me to move from Chicago to Italy, and eventually London as well for my career path. It led me to meet people I would have never imagined I would have met. And it ultimately led to my novel, Under the Light of the Italian Moon. So for those of you who've read it, you know, but for those of you who have not, the story is two things. It's a love story and a story of women's resilience during the rise of fascism and World War II. And it tells the story of Mina Argenta. Mina Argenta is the daughter of a very strong-willed Italian midwife. And she's so strong-willed that they call her La Capitana. And this daughter of hers ends up falling in love with a boy named Pietro Ponte, who's a boy who's immigrating to the coal mines of America. And as their love grows, Nina stays in Italy with her mother while Mussolini gets more and more power and starts to really drive the country into chaos and this alliance with Hitler. And when the war breaks out, they eventually lose touch, and she has to try to survive Nazi-occupied Italy with her family in hopes of being reunited with him again at some point. So it's really two parts, and I know you guys speak Italian. So un colpo di fulmine, you'll know this as a lightning bolt of love, similar to Love at First Sight. This is very much a love story. There is a beautiful love story underneath all of this that I'm very, very proud of, something very powerful in terms of the love between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. But really at the heart, it's about donna feria, very, very strong, incredibly resilient women whose stories really never get told and who really are the heart of the family and the heart of Italy in many ways. So my book takes place in Fonzaso. I'll tell you a little bit about the city. For those of you who probably haven't heard of it, I always thought it was such a beautiful name when my grandmother told me about it when I was in high school. When I asked her, where did you grow up, Grandma? And were you, World War II, did it have any impact on you? Learning as a kid in America about World War II and really barely talking about Italy when it came to World War II. I found out that Fonzaso was very far northeast, almost on the border, really right at the border of Austria, very close, and right up against the Dolomites, the Grand Dolomiti. And if you see, it's about a 2-hour drive from Venice and about 2 hours from Bolzano, where there was also a transit camp that sent people off to some of the concentration camps in Germany and Austria. So it was this area that my grandmother and my family were living in during World War II. And one of the things that I discovered as I started to do my research was this website, which is called Atlante delle Stragi Nazisti e Fascisti in Italia. And basically what you can do is you can type in the region where your family is from, and every Nazi and fascist atrocity that happened and was recorded shows up on a map. And you can see where the F is here is Fonzaso. So if you can imagine a woman living in Italy trying to raise her children in this, what you see is a sea of red, basically an atrocity or something was happening almost every day. And the things that they were seeing, the things that they were surviving were like nothing we could have ever imagined. And so I realized that my grandmother and her family had grown up in a very difficult time. She had already told me about some of the atrocities that had happened. I was able to then connect them back to the documented atrocities. And those were really what I started digging into. And ultimately, if you've read the book, you know that some of those are in the culmination of the novel. Some of those stories that she told me that I later referenced on the website. So Fonzaso is a beautiful town. It looks very much like a fairy tale in a way. You can see the campanile, all the little streets that kind of, go off into the mountains. And what's really interesting is the wall of mountains right here, the cliffs of the Dolomiti, which is really just a wall behind the town. And up here, you can see in the corner, there's a little castle. It looks like a little castle and a small church. And then there's a Madonna statue here. And they basically years ago, because fires were very prevalent in the town, they made a man live up here, a little hermit, and he would be paid in cornmeal so that he could make polenta and survive. And he had his own church here as well. And he would watch over the town. And then if fires started, he would ring the bell. So he was sort of this, omnipresent person who would always be watching over the town. And it makes Fonzaso quite unique because as soon as you drive in, you see that, and it's very interesting. And then if you go up in this area, you will end up at Sant'Anna. Sant'Anna is one of the very important places because it's where the women would go to pray for their children. And if you've read the book, again, because this is very much about mothers and daughters and women surviving a lot of atrocities, the Virgin Mary and Catholicism is something that is very prevalent in this part of the country, and specifically, really the Virgin Mary, Saint Anne, very important to these women. Every one of the women in my family wears these medallions of the Madonna. I wear them. I wear it, and my daughter got one for her communion. But Santa Anna didn't actually look like this during the time that my book would have been taking place. It was actually a very small altar among grapevines. And in fact, the restoration of Santa Anna and this big, beautiful altar, you find out at the end of the book what my family had to do with this particular altar. Another interesting two places that these are pictures of Fonzaso that take place in the book is you can see the Municipio here on the left, and it's decorated for the Festa de Uva. So my favorite love scene in the book takes place during the Festival de Uva. It's one of the, it's a sad scene, but it's also a beautiful scene. And sometimes when I read that to different groups and so forth when we're live in person, but I'll let you guys read it on your own. And then on the right here, you can see the Via Calzan, and most of the book takes place on the Via Calzan. This is a picture I took in October of 2020, just before the book was about to be published. You can see it really hasn't changed probably very much from the time that I was writing about. So in terms of the storytellers, in order to learn about all of those questions that I had that I needed answers to, I connected back to as many people as I could that were alive and that had been there during the time that my grandmother was in Italy during the war. And these are the wonderful people who I interviewed, these 8 incredible people. The first one on the left is actually my grandmother. So she's the one who kind of started it off by telling me some of the original stories that led to all my questions. And then my aunt is the second person on the left. She really picked up when my grandmother passed away, and she has been incredible in terms of giving me so many stories and helping me connect back also to the people in Italy. But what's really interesting about this slide is a couple of things. First of all, everyone on the left immigrated. They left Italy after the war. They moved to Canada or they moved to the States. Everyone on the right remained. They stayed in Italy. The people who left, they never taught their children Italian. They raised their children as American or Canadian citizens and very much wanted them to integrate into society. So the language really stopped with them. And they kept contact with the people in Italy, but it was only them that could speak Italian to each other. And the people on the right never taught their children English. So had it not been for the book, really, because as the generations kind of move on, they lose contact. And certainly because of the language, it makes it even harder to stay in contact. I really feel like the connection back to the family would have been lost. So I'm very happy that the book will sort of always be that way of securing the relationship for future generations. The other thing I would say about this is when I sat and interviewed all of these people, I sat across from them, usually drinking grappa or coffee and definitely eating lots of fantastic Italian food, both in Italy and around the rest of the world. But I didn't see them for what they were now. I didn't see them with the, the age spots on their hands and their gray hair and their glasses, and some of them with their stockings rolled down to their ankles, as we know, our older Italians sometimes do. We all know this, right? But I didn't see them like that. I saw them as they were, as my characters in the book. I saw them as they were going through this and living through these times. And I hope that it's a message to anyone who reads the book or who hears me speak, to take the time to sit down with anyone who who is older. And also, if you're older yourself, just to sit down with your family and tell your story and ask others their story, especially when they were young, especially for women before they became mothers. Because sometimes, the identity of women, especially before they become mothers, gets a bit lost after they do. So I think that's a really important thing that I was able to do, and I'm very happy about that. Unfortunately, we've lost 3 of these 8 people now through the 14-year process, now 15 years with the publication date. So, but they were wonderful, and they were so happy. And the ones who were around before it was published have been just so thrilled and happy to have the book out in the world. So outside of talking to people and just getting stories from the witnesses who had been there, I also had to do a lot of research. So I did some obviously nonfiction reading. The best book, I think, was How Fascism Ruled Women, because remember, I was writing about a midwife and how Mussolini's all of his policies impacted women, impacted pregnancy, impacted midwives. And so Victoria de Grazia's book was absolutely fantastic. War in Italy by Richard Lamb gives you every single detail to what happened in Italy. So that was super helpful in terms of the war aspects of the book. But then, in writing fiction and in trying to connect with the hearts and minds of characters, I also needed to make sure that I didn't put my modern mentality into the characters I was writing about, because this was historical biographical fiction. So it's biographical in the fact that it's based on true, real people who have lived, but it's also blended with a thread of fiction. So what I did was I read a lot of different Italian authors who were writing during fascism. So Alberto Moravia, Bassani, and then the best book I was able to find was Unspeakable Women, which was translated by Robin Pickering Iazzi. And you're at a library, so you can order all of these books. That's fantastic. But Unspeakable Women was stories that were written by women during fascism that really just never got the attention that they should have. So it was great because I was really able to read those and understand the mentality women were in at the time versus applying my modern mentality. And then finally, there were so many other things, from going through PhD dissertations on midwifery in Italy. I visited the University of Padua, where my great-grandmother studied to become a midwife, went through exhibitions, obviously spent a lot of time with the priest, because the church rectory, if anyone has to go back and get records, going to sit with the priest, you'll get everything you need. They are very, very helpful. Spent a lot of time at the Municipio. I went through Ellis Island records, which are fantastic. And then really everybody started sending me a lot of documents. So friends and family started sending me a lot of information about my family that I didn't know. And then, of course, watching a lot of Italian films as well. My favorite probably being Two Women with Sophia Loren, which is also a book by Moravia. And there's really 4 parts of history that Under the Light of the Italian Moon covers. It covers immigration and World War I. It covers midwifery in rural Italy. It talks about fascism and Mussolini's impact on women. And then, of course, World War II Italy, which was very different for Italians in the North, where ultimately, when the South was liberated, it was still technically under the puppet state of the Salo Republic. And technically Mussolini, once he had been rescued from the Germans, was back in power in the North. And the Germans really came in and were there and caused a lot of problems there, which are in the book. Some of the things that came to me are, if you look on the top left, you can see this poster of the local fascists in Ponzazzo. This is something that a cousin ended up unearthing and sending to me. And probably one of the biggest surprises as I was doing the research was to find that my great-grandfather here, the husband of the very strong-willed midwife, was actually a very enthusiastic fascist. enthusiastic enough to have been, on kind of, the local poster for it and everything. Obviously, most people, or a lot of people, ended up carrying a fascist card because there were benefits that came with it. There were negatives if you didn't join, but I was quite surprised to see him kind of, quite high up on this poster with the manifesto of fascism above him. The Belluno Historical Society sent me a lot of pictures of Mussolini when he came through Belluno. He came through a few times, once to visit with Hitler, and he came through Fonzaza once. And one of my cousins was there and was able to give me his experience when that happened. And that's also written into one of the scenes in the book. And then, of course, researching all the propaganda was really interesting too, and gave me a lot of the scenes. My great grandmother had to give her ring away in order to raise money for gold for the fatherland in 1935, when Mussolini was collecting gold so that he could wage his war in Abyssinia, what is now Ethiopia. And if you can imagine a woman who is separated from her husband, who has this beautiful gold band, engraved, she's misses him so much, and she has to just stand and take off her ring and plop it in with everybody else's, all to help fund a war that she has nothing to do with. So I think, all of these things really were unearthed over the 14 years as I was doing the research, and then eventually made it into the book, and helped give a lot of context to all the stories then that I was told by my family members. So essentially, while I was writing this book in stolen moments, because I was working full time, I was raising a daughter, I was traveling a lot for work, but I would write early in the mornings, or I would write on vacations. I would write anytime I could. And really, when I closed the door to my office and I opened up my laptop, this is where I was. I was in Italy. I was in 1930s, 1940s Italy. I could smell the polenta. I could feel, I could smell the firewood burning. I could feel the violence. I could feel the happiness and the joy of some of the births, and the sadness and some of the losses. All of this just came to life for me. And I think ultimately, in the end, after it was all done, all of these women who inspired me, this picture that I sat with my grandmother looking at, and she wrote the names of everybody on the back of it before she died. I do really believe that I was able to really breathe life back into these people, certainly for myself. And I also believe for everybody who's been reading it around the world. And ultimately, I think in that sense, I have given my daughter something of her grandmother, of her family, that she'll always be able to have with her. And I'm very glad that I've given it to the world, and I'm hoping that it inspires other people, because their families also have these beautiful stories, and they have these incredible Italian women in their lives who deserve to have their stories known and their questions answered. So I'll just read the opening of my book for you, because I feel like it represents sort of everything that the book is. It all begins with women. In them, heaven and earth transfer. Creation comes to life, and all of humanity springs forth. In the mother's powerful womb, the transition from godly to worldly takes place. It was Mary who gave birth to eternity and redemption. The strength of the world is in its women. The power of the world is within its women. Yet it is the women we erase. Some women are unwilling to be forgotten or to forget, particularly if they are Italian. So, Okay, grazie. 100 baci. Can I can I take some questions?
Great,
Hi.
thank you. I'll call on people, if
Okay.
yes, Camille Kramer. Thank you, that was so beautiful.
Thank you. Could you hear the music?
No.
Oh, well, it was Ave Maria.
This piece deserves music.
Yeah, well, look it up on YouTube. You can listen to it. It has a piece of Ave Maria
Oh,
behind it.
okay. Camille, you have to unmute.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Were you were a writer before you wrote this book? Is that correct?
No, I always was very passionate about writing, and obviously when you're in, advertising and marketing, communications is kind of your base. I always was a big reader and writer as a child, but I had to do a lot of classes. So I took courses in Chicago with Daniel Cleaver at the Writers Lodge, or Writers Loft. That was one of the first classes that I did, and then I did quite a few courses here in London. And then I worked with two phenomenal editors. One is Sally Orson Jones, who works with Sarah Waters. And then I worked with Angela Meyer, who worked on The Tattooist of Auschwitz and Silka's Journey. So very much in the same genre. And both of them really helped me just refine and also just streamline, because, I tend, over 14 years, it was quite a beast. It was a lot. So I had to do a lot of cutting back to make it as clean as possible. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Mhm.
It wasn't easy, but it took 14 years. So,
Anyone else? Is that Anne with your hand raised?
I say that presentation was a work of art in itself. It really
Thank
was.
you.
It was-
Thank you.
We appreciated the book, but I think seeing all that went on behind even gave it more importance. But who was the lady on the cover? The picture of the lady on the cover.
So so the picture of the woman is meant to be representative of Nina. It's a piece of artwork, but it's meant to be representative of Nina. But at the same time, I think you can also make it be Laja, at some point in the book, because I think this is the thing. We become our mothers, every stage they go through, we just follow right behind them. And I think that's the beauty of the book, is that, eventually my daughter is going to be the same age that Nina was when Nina fell in love with Pietro. And at some point, Laja was that same age. And, we replace each other basically, but we kind of live ultimately very similar lives as women. But the picture of Fonzazo was actually one that I took, that my cover artist was able to incorporate and turn into the cover, which I was very proud of. I took it from Santa Ana while I was there.
Anyway, the love story was unbelievable. And I have to admit, I had to go to the end. I couldn't wait to find it. Then I went back. But there was one part that concerned me, was it the sister who was hiding the letters that came from the guy?
Yeah,
She did,
yeah.
right? No, that was
So, yeah, remember a couple things. So remember, this is historical biographical fiction. It's not all, there's a thread of fiction that goes through this. However, what I will say is this, I think this is representative of, all of us have those toxic members in our family, those people who just do stuff that you're like, why would you do that? The Argenta family was no different. And this particular character, who's based off of one of the sisters, this was very much their type of kind of their status quo. There were so many stories everywhere I went about this particular sister, about the kinds of things that she did. No matter what, if I was hearing them in English, or if I was hearing them in Italian translated back. So remember, it is fiction. Not everything is, 100% based on stories or based on actual fact. It is fiction, but at the same time, very much aligned with the character.
And is that aunt still living?
No, many of them are gone. Yeah.
Thank you. Maria, you had your hand up. You want to unmute? Maria.
Hi. I was very intrigued by a lot of the all of the names, the first names of your characters.
Mm-hmm.
They're not usual. They're not typical kinds of names. Are they specific to that area?
That's a good question. They were just, most of the names I did not change actually. But Ninetta was Maria, right? I mean, almost every one of them was Maria as the first name. So I actually, when I started off the book, I called her Maria, but then Maria Beruchetta, who is the one that they adopt, she was still alive, and she's one of the people who helped me write the book. So I needed her to be Maria, and I knew it would be confusing. And everyone called Maria Ninetta. So Nina Argenta, actually on her obituary, it's Maria Ninetta Argenta. And in fact, that is a true story about the complication about getting her over, because my great-great-grandfather did put Ninetta on the paperwork, and it caused an entire extra year after all that time, them not seeing each other. It caused a whole nother year on top of everything, because he wrote Ninetta instead of her actual name that was on her birth certificate.
I had to laugh because one of your characters' name is Bertoluzzi, and my name is Bortoluzzi. And I was, of course, the one time a similar name comes up, it's associated with a not too pleasant,
Well, his wife was a lovely woman. Yeah, I think again, these are all the things that we don't. There's so much more probably. There's probably a lot of layers that I could have gone deeper in terms of women's experiences being brought in. But, for example, domestic abuse was something that was happening and still continues to happen, but it was very prevalent back then. So that needed to go in the book. And this was part of the story, especially the connection with the captain and what happened to lead to her death. But also there's a scene where Laja, in the middle of everything happening, in the middle of the Russian, the Cossacks that came in and ended up staying with them and so forth. I don't know if you remember that scene, but Laja gets her period basically right there. And this is the thing that women deal with. It doesn't matter if there's a war. It doesn't matter if the world is falling apart around us. We have to deal with these things, and we just get on with it. But you never see them written in books. And this is the reality that, every woman, you think that they're dealing with something tough, and then they have that underneath it, and they have to figure out things, beyond that. So I'm very happy that I was able to kind of get into some of those levels of things that women deal with that are very much buried, or just, assume that we don't talk about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Francesco? Or
Are you also a poet? Because on page 168, there's a beautiful poem that the husband wrote to the wife and left on her pillow. Is that original for
do you mean the poem? Actually, I think you mean which poem are you talking about? Can you read it, or read the beginning?
The poem?
Mm-hmm.
An Hour of Passion.
Okay, so that poem is not from the husband. If you remember, that poem is from the man that Ninetta kind of flirts with, and he leaves that for her, and then Pietro finds that poem.
So it's an actual poem that he wrote.
So the poem actually was a gift to me in the book. So if you read at the beginning, I credit it to Francesco Boff wrote this poem. So I incorporated, he's actually a Fonzaso resident, and he is a poet. And so I asked him for permission to use it in this context in the book. So he actually was able to have his book. It's a nice poem, isn't it?
Yes.
Actually, he publishes his poems in this little town. He's written a lot of poems about my aunt. He had a thing for her. If you remember Rita, so you remember the character Francesco Boff in the book. He actually, is very close friends with Rita throughout the book, and he actually wrote her many poems. He was very in love with her, even though she didn't marry him. Both of them are still alive, and they still flirt, usually through me. And she calls him every once in a while. But it's been hard because with COVID, I go back as much as I can to Fonzaso and to the States to see them. But, because they were so isolated, their memories now in the past year and their health has really gone down. And it's really hard to see that happen, because when I started writing this and started meeting them, they were in their 70s. And then it just flew by, and then COVID seemed to exacerbate a lot of things. So I'm very glad that the book came out in time for them to be able to be part of everything, which has been amazing.
Has it been translated into Italian?
Not yet. So we just sold the rights for Romanian and for Czech. The audio rights are on bid right now. So we have to figure out who's going to end up buying those. And then we're waiting on Italy. So this is what I'm hoping is going to be my Christmas gift this year. I'll find out who is interested. Originally, Newton Compton came and was interested, but you know, things go very slowly sometimes in Italy, especially right before summer. So my fingers are crossed for Newton Compton to come through. If anybody knows anybody over there, you know, pull a good word for me.
And did you say you found someone to read the book? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Francesca.
So ultimately it's going to be, so I'm not going to be involved in it. It's going to be, it'll be a publisher who's gonna jump in. And they'll assign the person. I'll get to approve, but I won't be able to, we decided to kind of, you know, do it that way instead.
It was very clever on your part how you used the moon, that they were in two different countries, but they could connect with the moon. I thought that was beautiful.
The
Thank
whole
you.
book was beautifully written.
Thank
The
you so much.
craftsmanship that you displayed in it is remarkable. And it just, I'm sure to all Italians, men and women, it brings back some memory from childhood. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. I get emails from both men and women of various ages, most of them who have, you know, real pride in their Italian heritage. And it makes me feel so happy to have, you know, that impact, especially to make them think about their own family, because that's really, you know, ultimately what matters. When it comes to the moon, I think the incredible thing about the moon is even now, you know, when I look at that moon, I think that's the same moon that looked over my great grandparents and my grandmother and all of them. It's that same moon. Every struggle that we're having now, they went through struggles, awful struggles as well, under the same moon. And it really kind of connects us all over time. And of course, Italians hold a lot of, you know, myths behind the moon. And La Bella Luna, it's, you know, obviously something that is very close to our hearts. Whenever I'm in Italy and I see the moon, it's everything. I love it. So thank you for noting that.
Jennifer, my mother-in-law, who is Italian, but she was born here in the United States. Her parents were born in Italy. And so I gave her the book to read because I had enjoyed it. And she said to me, she wanted me to tell you how much she enjoyed reading the book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. What characters did you guys like the best or connect to? I'm curious. Tom, hi Tom.
Hi, thanks a lot for writing the book. I absolutely loved it. I finished it. I came to Italy first week of September, and I had already written the book. I read the book because I couldn't put it down, and I would have it on my coffee table and kept reading it. I love Nina because what amazed me is it brought me back to the stories. I don't have any Italian blood in me. I just love Italy, and that's why I'm here. But my mother was a teenager growing up during the Blitz in London. And I was always amazed when she told me stories, how she made it sound like they had just adjusted to a new normal. And when I read about Nina and the horrible things, not only the difficulty with Pietro being away, but the horrible things that were going on during the occupation, it just became the new normal. It wasn't like they sat around and moaned. They just did the best they could under difficult situations. And it made me think of the stories my mother used to tell me about going into the tube tunnels and coming out and finding that the house on either side of theirs was gone and theirs was untouched. Or people that they knew and, you know, that she grew up in school with were gone, and they carried on to the next day. And Nina sounded very much like that to me. So I really admired it. Your reviewers, a couple of them used the word painful. And I have to tell you that I felt everybody's pain reading the book. I was almost afraid to keep reading for what's going to happen next.
Oh.
So I was kind of happy that the end wasn't some, finale of pain.
No, ultimately it's a story of hope, but it's also a recognition of what these people survived. And, yeah, no, I living in London, I mean, I'm surrounded by that same history. I live right behind the V&A Museum, and they still have the marks where the bombs hit the building. They didn't fill them in. And so every day I walk past the V&A, which is like one of my favorite places in the world outside of Italy. And I can see where the bombs hit. And it's really, it wasn't that long ago. That's what's so weird about it. It really, they weren't so, this is what I think. You look at a black and white photo. I love looking at black and white photos because I love staring at them and just looking at the people and just thinking about their stories, because it's so easy to look at I think when you look at something in black and white, it just feels like, oh, those people didn't have emotions. Those people were stronger then. They were just like us. They just had to deal with what was happening around them, just like we're having to deal with what's happening around us right now. So, I do think that, it's important to remember that they were human, and they had emotions, and they were jealous, they were scared, they were angry. They went through all of those things. Just because sometimes we know them when they're older in life, it's easy to just wash away their history. And it breaks my heart. I really wish I would have asked more questions. I look forward. I don't want to, be on the other side, but when I do go, I'll be so happy to see them and find out, what I got right, what I didn't get right, and what else there was.
A few years ago, the last of my uncles in England, I have family in England and in America. My Uncle Morris died at 102. And his granddaughter at the memorial service read a book that you would have loved. It was a book of questions and answers that she asked Grandpa before he died.
That's nice.
And she read excerpts for about 15 minutes, and everybody was crying.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Absolutely. Yeah. Camille, hi.
Hi. I'm glad you mentioned about, asking the questions, because I was always, my mother always told me stories when I was a little girl, and I was a very inquisitive little girl. So even when I was a teenager, my husband says I interviewed people, but I spoke to all the old people who are probably my age now. I mean, the age I am now. But where did you come from? Why did you come here? Why did you leave? All of those, even my husband's family. My mother-in-law used to call me to ask questions about her family because I had asked all the questions. But the interesting thing is that I found is my mother always told me, my mother was born in the States. Her parents were from Italy. And in 1937, my grandfather took them to Italy. My mother always told me they went for a visit to the grandmother who was dying. And I think that's what she believed because that's what she was told. She was a kid. But I found repatriation papers of my grandparents, which means it wasn't a visit. They planned to stay there. So when I thought more about it, I thought, well, they were kids and kids were not privy to what adults were doing back then. So they probably said, we're going to visit grandma. Don't worry, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that some of the information that I have, their feelings about it, that's their feelings. So those are always valid. But the facts are not necessarily what they think they were, because especially if they were children. Yeah. So it's interesting, the more people, and my mother's brother's still alive and he's 96, and he remembers a lot. And I said, well, what about this? And he said, that was no visit. We were supposed to go live there. And so how did he know and my mother didn't know? It's interesting.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I think, of course, that's why my book is historical biographical fiction. It's not, and I truly believe that in the end, because nobody does think about it. Does everybody know everything about our lives? Do we even write in our journals everything that we're thinking and feeling? Right. We don't, of course not. It's ours, right? It's ours. And so I think what I was forced to do, and the good thing is over 14 years, is you're able to kind of put yourself into that person's shoes and think then through what's the history, what's going on, what are the stories I heard from all these people? And then if I put myself in that person's life, knowing what came before, knowing what came after, knowing what's around her, what are the different ways she might react, and then choosing a path. And then, you have to keep doing that throughout the book. When I started writing the novel, I was 29 years old. I was pregnant. My daughter was in my womb. When I finished writing the novel, I was 43. She was 14 years old. I was the same age Nina was at the end of the book. So I lived through being not, a woman who hadn't had a baby, fairly new marriage, all the way through, those experiences and those ups and downs as a woman that you feel, those times as a woman when you feel like your child is so amazing and like, wow, this is fantastic. And then those times as a woman and a mother that you just feel scooped out, like everything, like you're not there for anything else except for their needs. And I think that was a positive thing, because it helped me to kind of, put that also into my thinking about what Nina would have been going through after all the things that were happening with her husband abroad, with her children, with the losses of her, with all the different people coming in and out of her life. So yeah, sometimes I think there's truth and there's more, you get to more truth through fiction. And I've heard some other authors talking about that as well.
I like the way these people depended on their faith, and you brought that out. It was very consoling at times.
Yes. And there was definitely a kind of the women were all about, really the church was kind of the center of everything. And then fascism kind of came up against that a little bit, because, then it was all about the state was kind of more important. And then eventually they kind of, came together because they had mutually beneficial agendas. But yeah, that also I think comes into play a little bit, faith, politics, fascism. Yeah, it was very timely, because actually I think the Capitol steps were stormed on January 6th. And that was the day that my book hit #1 for while it was on pre-order. So that was just a little bit surreal, when all the, crazy politics were kind of happening in our own day, and thinking back to everything that happened back then, the March in Rome and all of these different things. So that was quite fascinating to think, gosh, we still live in turbulent times.
We've got a question down this end. Go ahead, Joanne.
Are you sure? First, complimenti. The book is really pretty amazing when you think about it, and as you describe everything that you went through and how you put it together. So thank you very much for that. What's next for you, and what do we have to look forward to?
So I started writing the second book. There is a minor character. I don't know if you remember, but there's a moment when Rita leaves her house and goes to the cemetery, and there's a time where she sees what she thinks is her older cousin, in an underground meeting. And Francesco both kind of says, I know what they're doing. I know they're helping the partisans. I'm helping them, he says. So Mary actually left over 8 audio recordings of her telling the story of how she helped the partisans. And she keeps saying in the audio, I should have written a book. I led such an incredible life. I should have written a book. And so her nieces and nephews sent me those. And I've been listening to them. I've been walking around Hyde Park listening to all of them. And so I've been working on a book about her life that is obviously, it's woven in during that same time so it's not a proper sequel, but it's sort of a bit of an offshoot. So hopefully it won't take 14 years, but it just depends, because I still work in the corporate world and still, love my career as well.
We have another question in the rear.
Okay.
Yeah, hello. I enjoyed thoroughly reading the book, and it kind of put me in a position where I've been debating about some way writing something about my dad's side of the family as well. That's a very interesting, intricate story. There's drama, there's crime, there's a lot of things happening. And I'm in about 10 days, getting ready to go to visit my parents in Tunisia. That's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. And my dad has been in the process of writing his memoirs, but he's kind of covered his childhood a bit of the mystery that we investigated about the side of his family that's Sicilian. And I was wondering if you have any suggestion as to what's the best way, what's the better maybe technique to record some of the things. Should I bring with me a recorder? Should I try to take notes as much as I can? Should I try to meet other members of the family as well? Like, what's your perspective on this?
I think if I were to go back and do it, I mean, obviously with book 2, I learned so much in book 1 through the process of book 1, just fumbling into, writing this. And it in the end, it was so challenging because of the organization. Now there's so many tools available, honestly, for free online that really help you get organized. I would say, bring either your iPhone and do your recordings on that while you also take notes. So do both. So you could always go back and listen again. Make sure you ask for permission to, of course, record. And then there's something called Nanowrimo, which is National Novel Writing Month. And it starts actually in 7 days. If you go to the Nanowrimo website, it's a challenge of writing a novel in 1 month. It's 50,000 words in 1 month. And the prize is that you just wrote a rough draft of your novel, but the resources on that for laying out your characters and laying out your plot are phenomenal, free, wonderful, and it's a great community as well. So yeah, best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Can you put the name of that in the chat?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
those
let me
understand.
Yeah.
So it's great. Oh, now I have a better view of the whole library. Thank you. Anyway, I have 2 questions, but and then if anybody else has a question before I move on. Well, you mentioned your daughter, and so she sort of lived through the writing of this book, and now she's a little bit more of an age to understand. What has the impact been on her, and has she read it, or what is she thinking about in terms of your story?
Yeah. So she, she was with me the whole way, right? She was in my womb when I wrote those questions. And then as I started going back to Italy, she'd come with me. She'd usually be sitting at those tables with me, with those older people. And, at the beginning, she was maybe 2.5 and they were, tossing a ball back and forth with her. And then she was 4 and they were giving her cookies and chocolates and things like that. Then she was 7 and then she was 10 and then she was 13 and she was with me at the University of Padua when we went and did the research on the midwives. And we had so many interesting, if you go to my YouTube channel, there's so many funny stories of some of the things that happened while I was doing this research. If you look up Under the Light of the Italian Moon on YouTube, I have several videos where I talk about some of these different stories. The best one is, well, there's many, but Francesco Boff, we went to interview him and he speaks pure Italian. And I had the translator with me. We went to his house. We were all sitting there. My daughter, I think she was 10 at the time. And all of a sudden he stood up and he started unbuttoning his trousers and started to pull down his pants. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? What's happening? Like, what did I get my daughter into? Oh no, like, and the translator was like, I'm looking at her and my daughter's like freaking out. And then he shows me, he had a cut where the Nazis had stabbed him from hip all the way down to knee. And he wanted to show me where he had been bayoneted basically. And so yeah, just like so many things like this, this is her life experience, sitting around watching her mother interview all these old people, going to Italy again and again and tracking down things. And, so it was a very amazing experience for her. And I think she also helped edit the book. So she read along the way. Her big thing was dialogue. Mom, people don't talk like that. Mom, no, teenagers would never talk like that. That's not how, she was really good at these types of things. She's very critical. So she has interest in editing. She has interest in, history. She speaks Italian partially now. She's been studying for 5 years. I think there's a good chance that she'll probably go into, studying modern languages and maybe editing or literature. It seems
Great.
to be her thing.
Well, I'm impressed too that you had the presence of mind to record. Did you record these little episodes as they were happening, or is you now retelling?
No,
what happened?
yeah. Leading up to the to the publishing of the book, I started doing these little short videos to go over some of the memories from the years.
Yeah, because I find the greatest difficulty, I went to Italy to interview some of my parents, the paisans in a little town where the Nazis had taken over, and trying to find out the history of the hidden Jews. But I was so emotional about it, I'm so caught up. I didn't really take good notes, and I didn't record it. Like, you know, and it's a fear to put it all down too. So it's good to learn those techniques, and I hope, you know, Rivette can benefit from that too, because it'd be interesting to hear those stories from her. Now let's talk. Another question I have, unless anybody else has one, is sort of, so, you know, with this group, you know, we've been practicing our Italian, and it's not a formal class, we don't have a teacher, but how do you find the best methods for you in terms of, you know, practicing your Italian? You had a translator, but what were the sort of the techniques? And then what would you recommend for us? Because we also, as a book, Libro, Apertivo, we try to find a book with Italian theme or culture of protagonist in English, so the people who don't have the extended skills. Or would you recommend maybe we take something on that's, you know, Italian in Italian? I'm interested in the two women, Moravia, but
I mean, two women. I love to watch film. I love to watch films and that with the subtitles. I mean, for me, that, you know, is great. So my Italian is very, very weak, and it's sad to me. But I mean, I am, you know, when I speak to Italian groups in Italian, I have like a little thing that I have prepared, and I kind of, you know, read it, and I'm comfortable with that. But at the end of the day, I am the granddaughter of immigrants, and there's nothing I can do about that. They did not teach me Italian because they wanted me to be American. And my grandmother, she never wanted to leave Italy. She, you know, if you read the book, you know, she did not want to leave. She ended up going with her family. She always planned on going back, and she never got to go back. And I feel like I returned her to Italy. But there's nothing I can do about the fact that she didn't raise me speaking Italian, and neither did, and my mother doesn't speak Italian. It is what it is. That was what happened. Trying to go back and learn is very hard, and I have been working on it for years. And when I'm in Italy, especially, you know, when I'm at our home there, I'm getting by with probably super broken, you know, brutta lingua. So it's bad. But at the same time, I know, in my own head, I can read it quite well. So when I was writing the book, if there was something I wanted to say in Italian, I thought it in Italian. I just had to check the grammar, and I had to check the spelling and all of those things. And then I just had to double check, of course, with Italian native speakers that the context was right for that particular use and so forth. And that took a lot of time, doing that multiple times. And maybe somebody finds a mistake in there. It's possible, but probably, I don't know, probably not. We kind of really scrubbed it quite well. But yeah, I think for me, this is something that's a goal of mine, is improving my Italian. And I go for work all of the time, but people tend to want to speak in English just because it's faster. So for me, I'm going to have to probably, you know, again, just prioritize it when I have more time. Yeah, and in the meantime, I keep watching movies in Italian, and there's a blogger called Learn Italian with Lucrezia. Yes. Do you guys know this? She's so cute. She read the book and talked about it. But I know a lot of people like her because she lives just everyday life, and she takes you with her, and she, you know, talks to you about what she's doing in Italian. And I think a lot of people find that super useful, you know.
She's in Rome, right? Is she in Rome?
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Right. Great, thank you. And then books or movies you would recommend that we should, in either language, or what do you think we should tackle?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, definitely Two Women. I have so many here. So Two Women for sure, which is Moravia. If you like nonfiction, I highly, highly recommend How Fascism Ruled Women. It is eye-opening. You will be so shocked at, and honestly, I don't think you can understand Italy and Italian women unless you read that book. I'm going to be honest. It is so powerful, and it's shocking that this isn't more, everything isn't more known about the impact of Mussolini on women at the time. It's truly incredible, and it's really important for us to be aware of today. Who else? Yeah, I love, The Garden of the Finzi-Continis.
I mean, that, yeah.
Okay, love that. And anything by Bassani, although his sentences can sometimes be like a full page long.
Right.
So, he wasn't a very good example for a first author who, isn't supposed to be writing super long sentences. But yeah, I can send a few more. I have a very, very long list.
Okay.
Anything Elena Ferrante, of course, she's like my idol. So, love all her stuff.
Mhm. Thank you. That's wonderful. Really appreciate that. So does anybody else have some questions? I'm trying to go back to gallery view so I could see everybody. Questions, anyone? Or
I have
just
one question. Jennifer, are you an Italian citizen?
Yes, I am. It took a
And-
long time to get it, but yes, I have Italian citizenship.
Okay.
Mhm.
You got
And
it through one of your grandparents?
I got it through my grandfather. So even though he was born in America, because his father had not naturalized before he was born,
Right.
I was able to do jus sanguinis.
Right, that's what I
and
did
get
as
it.
well. And my son would be like your generation, and he got it through his grandfather. Yeah, the same thing. Mhm.
Yeah, it's completely changed my life. I mean, in 2012 we moved to Italy. We were able to work. Remember, before Brexit, the EU, I was able to work anywhere in the EU because of that
Right.
passport.
Right.
Now, of course, I have settled status here because now we're not part of the EU anymore in
Right.
the UK. But yeah, I mean, the benefits have been incredible.
Right.
thank you.
Jennifer, when Britain voted for Brexit, I immediately took advantage of my paternal grandfather being born in Galway and got my Irish passport. So I have now the three of them, the British passport, the Irish passport, and the US passport. So it
That's
does make
great.
things easy for me to stay in Italy more or less as long as I want without,
That's great.
having to have a visa. Where I think you said you live in the vicinity of Lake Como when you're in Italy?
Yeah. So my grandfather's side is from Lake Como, and this little town called Pianello dell'Ario. So we originally went there to buy my great grandmother's house, but it's owned by another side of another family, not another side, another family now, and we haven't been able to get our hands on it yet. So we just bought another place near there, and so yeah, we try to get there as often as possible.
A few weeks ago, I went to Lecco for a wedding. Are you in the vicinity of Lecco?
We're on the west side of the lake, so just
okay.
north of Menaggio, same side as George, just a little further north.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't want to keep Jennifer much longer. She's kind enough to give us an hour of her time. Anybody else, or should we that's it? All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Thanks. So yeah, feel free to check out the
Thank you.
YouTube. And if you go out to Bold Woman Writing, you can sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll know when the second book finally comes out.
Great.
And thank you to Pat. It's been so
Grazie.
nice working with Pat. She's such a rock star, such an incredible woman.
Want to hear
We
me
will never forget you, Pat.
say-
Aw.
National Organization of Italian American Women. I mean, what a great leader. We're all very lucky to have her.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll send the check later, but you want it in euros or no? Okay. All right. Thanks. It's so great seeing you again. As I said,
Okay, ciao. Arrivederci
Ciao,
tutti.
Jennifer.
Bye.
Grazie.
Bye. Ciao.
yeah. So
That
thank you.
was wonderful. That was wonderful.
So we have about 10 minutes. I mean, I think, I didn't expect such an incredible, I mean, I know she's very good, but her presentation
Wow.
was spectacular. So she's
Wonderful.
really, she's a communications expert.
Mhm.
So,
Could we get a copy of the reading list to share?
yeah, she said she's gonna send me one, but I will, I think, I'm thinking about, I don't know, Francesca, I'm sure you probably read about the two women, Alberto Moravia. I don't know if anybody,
Moravia would be very readable in English.
English.
Maybe even
oh, you want it in Italian? Well,
I think Italian's going to be hard,
Yeah.
especially, for this, I mean, we've been,
my only question about Moravia, is it gonna be very depressing? So,
oh,
probably.
of course it's going to be depressing. That's a depressing
It's a
story,
very tough
yeah.
story, very tough.
But, well, what is it, we want to open it up, Cindy, I'd like to get your impression. What did you think about the book and next book, Italian books, any ideas?
I thought it was great. I like historical fiction. And, there's something she said that I agree entirely with. Sometimes the way to learn history is through fiction, because you can immerse yourself in the period of time. You experience what the characters experience, and it gives you a much better picture of what was going on at the time. And so, I enjoyed it very much. And as I said, my mother-in-law, she just loved it.
Where is she from in Italy, or her family, do you know?
Southern Italy. And I'm trying to, I think, I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember the name of the town, but
Right.
my husband says it all the time, but I always forget it.
Well, it's great to know you. We have a paisan too. Thank you. So this is, and folks, I don't know, we can talk about if we want to pick a next book now. It's almost the end of October. If we want, I don't know, does anybody want to take a vote? Would have anybody in favor of going with 2 women next? Alberto Moravia?
Would be good.
Moravia is hard.
Well,
I can't hear the group in the library. Is any,
Moravia is a tough read. You mean?
is it tough read?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's heavy.
Because the subject matter is hard to get through.
any other suggestions?
did we have books lined up? Didn't we have a pipeline of?
We have a list.
We did have a pipeline, but I don't have it in front of me. So I know with my computer crash, it's going to be hard. But if anybody has the pipeline, they want to send it to me. Because I don't know, Cindy, if we have other books that you've ordered for us already, we might have sitting on the shelf, I'm not sure. But
Sitting on the shelf, Cindy.
I know she's always so good, and she's always 2 steps ahead of us. And when we mention books, she usually remembers and puts them down. So well, anyway, we can think about that because,
What are our options besides 2 women?
well, that's what I'm trying to, Mervet, do you remember we had a list? We checked it a couple last time because they were too dense, and think we had the bookmaker, was it the bookmaker of Florence, was just going to be too technical,
Yeah.
but that was too technical, I think.
If you
Anybody-
want to read about women during World War II again, the book The House in the Mountains, which is nonfiction by
I
Karen.
can't hear you.
What did she say?
Okay. The House in the Mountain, but it's.
The mountain, yes, I've heard a lot about that.
Nonfiction. It's nonfiction by Caroline Moorhead. She wrote 4 books about women during World War II. And 2 of them, I think, were based in Italy and 2 in France. But it's not, again, it's about women who were partisans. So it's a longer book. It's not a novel. I don't know. I liked it.
Want to alternate or stay with this period? That's always been, we do a lot in this period of time.
Yeah, I thought we,
Thank you, Elaine. I know that was on the list in the pipeline. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
yeah, because I thought we were more inclined to kind of alternate, and not that this is fascinating work, I mean, that's
Fiction
clear.
and nonfiction or different periods?
Different periods or heavier, lighter.
Sure. This is.
And I have a suggestion. I read it I don't know if you've ever read it, but I read it for Texas group that I'm in. It's called From Scratch. It's a memoir of love, Sicily, and I just went on, let me get the author. It's about an American who falls in love with a Sicilian, and this American actually is an actress. I've seen her name in movies. So it's a memoir, and she's actually African-American, and she falls in love with a Sicilian. It's quite interesting. And the name From Scratch is because he's a chef. It was a good book. Let me get the author.
Was it, but it's
Good.
contemporary, so it's not, it's written during this,
Stanby Locke. Stanby Locke is the author.
I can't
Yeah,
hear
let
you.
me get the author.
Stanby Locke.
Yeah, Tenby Locke. She's an actress.
But it's written more about contemporary society, right? We're not
It's
talking about-
contemporary. Yeah, I would say it's contemporary, yes.
That sounds good.
Let me just
Excuse
put-
me, who's the author?
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, good.
Let me just get it in there.
All right, we want to think about that, and then we can give it a week if anybody finds what else was in the pipeline. But we can have this, how long is it, Camille?
I don't think it was that long. let me just, yeah.
So going back to what Joanne was saying about alternating, so would we think that this was a lighter book and then we should be looking for more intense? I mean, it was a love story, but actually it wasn't really light in terms of the subject
No,
matter.
I didn't think it was light in any sense, really. I mean, excellent, obviously, but I was considering more something light, courtesan, like.
So I couldn't really make that out. I'm sorry, between my hearing aids and the volume in the library. So you said you don't think it was light because of the subject matter, right?
Yeah,
So we should be looking for something lighter. So the memoir might fit in that category. And then do we want to, like, I don't know, tackle something else by Moravia or Natalia Ginsburg? I heard it was a very good, Francesco, is that a suggestion or a wave?
I read a book quite a few years ago. I think it was called A House in Sicily. And it was about a young lady who inherited from her English grandfather a house in Sicily, and what she went through rehabbing it and doing that sort of thing.
that sounds light.
What was that called?
A House in Sicily,
Look it up.
Okay,
I think.
yeah, I've heard of that.
That sounds light.
Okay,
It's also holiday time, right? So I mean, everyone's gonna be, you know,
A House in
It's by-
Sicily.
It's by Daphne Phelps.
Okay, how long is it? Doesn't look, is it?
It's 288 pages.
Not too bad.
You can do that. Under 300 is good.
It says on Amazon, the captivating memoir of a resourceful woman who started life anew in the most beautiful house in Sicily. For 50 years at Casa Cucini in the small Sicilian town of Termina, Daphne Phelps has extended her English charm and warm hospitality to seasoned travelers and professional escapists, as well as to writers and artists like Tennessee Williams, Bertrand Russell, Henry Faulkner, and Roald Dahl. The memoir tells their story and hers. It begins in 1947.
The
author?
Yep.
The author's name is Daphne, Daphne Phelps, Phelps. It says a loving portrait of a vanishing way of life.
That sounds nice.
Should we go with that one, and then the other Sicilian memoir we could put on for future? A House in Sicily, should we take a vote or should we just go with?
Yes, House of Sicily.
It's fine.
Sicily, yes.
All right, let's go with the House in Sicily if Cindy can order it for us.
I will see, because it was published in 2000. It says they're paperbacks that you can get from Amazon, but I need to try first.
Okay, all right, and then we have the other one is back up. And then we'll put it on the schedule for like early December, before Christmas, I guess. It's October, today's October 23rd.
Yeah.
Okay,
Who is the author of House in Sicily?
Daphne Phelps.
we'll put it in the chat, if I can
Okay.
figure out where my chat went, okay.
Thank you.
DAPN. Okay, so that's good. If anybody wants to stay on and talk Italian for a while, whatever, I have to go to another great medical appointment. Sorry, but, so
That's all right.
Camille, are you guys good to stay another, whatever, 10 minutes? You want to close it out now? Cindy can also end the meeting, but I don't want to.
I think I have to get going, so.
So I guess we'll say goodbye on the Zoom. group in the library.
Okay,
Stay
thank
in.
you.
Cindy, thank the library.
Thanks,
This is
Pat.
Very nice. Thank you, Cindy, for the coffee and for the people here were so nice.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We are so happy to have people in the library at a program.
I'm thinking, can we book something in November? How do people feel like booking something in November? Because we're allowed to do this once a month, right? So we could just do conversation or something with the hybrid too. If Cindy's up, says, do you
Sure.
want to? So
Good
if,
question.
is there a Saturday in November you might want to do cafe in the library and keep Zoom? I'll be in Connecticut in November, but anyway, so Cindy, I should go through you, forget what's the available dates for the room in the library for a group?
Yes,
In
yes. to me and
November?
to or Dorothea Combus, but it's good for me to know too, so.
All right, so I'll send an email to Dorothea to see what Saturday we might be able to do in person, a hybrid like this, so the others can join us, and that'll be great. And did it work for the people in the library? Were you able to hear okay? Did it?
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah. Good.
I
Okay.
want to just tell people, in case anyone's interested, they have to email me and I'll give them a link. But this afternoon at 3, Betty Bono is doing an author speak on Zoom for her book Fear Itself, which is the second book in her series. And the next Saturday at 3 o'clock, we have Barbara Ballinger and Margaret Crane, and they'll be discussing their book Not Dead Yet. So
Barbara's a Barnard alumna that we had a couple of years ago for her first book, Suddenly Single at 50. She's so I didn't realize she was in 2 weeks, so I'll have to tell the Barnard Club because I missed
Yes.
that. If you have a notice, could you send that to me so the Barnard Club
Sure.
can circulate it? Okay.
yes,
She's not going to be in person though, right? It's going to be in
no,
Zoom?
it's on Zoom, yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So I think I could see you guys next week if everybody
Thank you,
wants.
Pat. This was wonderful.
Thank
It was wonderful.
Bravo.
Thank you,
And
Pat.
thank you, Cindy.
Bye.
Indeed.
All right. See you next week on Zoom. Ciao a tutti. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Grazie for
Belle
coming.
cose.
Grazie.
You were on this list as well.